Hello everyone. Thank you for all the love that you have shown to our first episode. I'm sure this second episode is gonna be equally interesting for you. Our guest today is Miss Anuradha Goyal. She's a travel blogger, she's a speaker, she's an author. And in this episode, we spoke extensively about the ancient Indian temples, the spiritual importance of the temples, the architect marvel that they are. We also connected how the stories of Ramayana and Mahabharata can be traced back to these temples. We spoke about the science behind our festival. If you are someone who loves the Indian tradition, who loves the temples, who loves, these great sagas that we have, you're gonna love this episode. And before I let you slip into this episode, a small announcement. We launched the iRonik Show Shorts channel. If you're someone who loves scrolling through the short content, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Here's giving to you Miss Anuradha Goyal. Hello Anuradha ma'am, how are you?
Namaste, I'm very
Namaste,
good
ma'am.
and I hope you all are doing great.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for joining the iRonik Show. It has been really good that we have you on the show. And the reason that I reached out to you because I have always been fascinated. I mean, it's not only me, I believe. We have been fascinated by the ancient Indian temples that we have around us, right? So we live in a society, we live in a country wherein the Mughals have ruled, the British have ruled. Now we are ruling the entire world. So there is a whole lot of amalgamation of different cultures, different styles that we have, but something that stands out for us Indians is our temples, the ancient temples that we have. So I would really request if you can just please enlighten us on your journey that you have been through through entire India, the temples that you have seen.
So I have written about my journey in a book called Lotus in the Stone, and I've spoken about how from a very casual traveler, I used to work in the corporate world in the IT sector, and as a casual traveler I started traveling and I started writing about my travel sometimes way back in 2004, and it kind of became my journey of exploring India. As I kept traveling, my travels kept getting deeper and deeper and deeper, and eventually we all find some things which attract us more than others. So for me it became heritage, art, culture, art history, and all of this all of these things come together beautifully in our temples. And also the fact that temples are a living heritage. So whenever we go to monuments, they are pretty much some relics from the past. Something that existed in the past, we just have to use our imagination and see how they would have. So you go to a fort and you have to imagine that, armies used to, stay in these forts, or they used to fight for these forts, or they used to use them to guard us. So you have to use a lot of visualization because we don't live on those times. But when you go to temples, most of them are still living temples. So the same worship that used to happen, let's say 2000 years ago, in some form and shape is still taking place. So temples to me became my heritage, which is living, which has gone, as they say, bina tantu tode, without breaking the thread, you have carried forward that. And also the fact that temples are not just temples, so if you live in North India, you've really not seen those big grand temples which have lots of things. You probably see very smaller versions of simpler, plainer temples which have been built recently and randomly. But if you really look at the ancient temples, thankfully a lot of them have survived in the south of Vindhyas. You will see that they were not just places to worship, they were places where people gathered for festivals, for community activities. They are the place, the walls of the temples are full of history, they are full of stories, they're full of stories from our epics. So even if you've not read Ramayana or Mahabharata, if you visit a temple and if you observe the sculptures carefully, you will be conversant with the story, or you'll be visually able to see the story or identify the story. So to me, they are a part of a living culture, and that's what makes them very, very fascinating. I have a detailed talk on different types of, I have classified temples based on my own experience. Most of the times temples get classified on the architectural style, now, which is a good way to classify them. But most of those temples are royal temples which were built by kings and the royal dynasty.
So these royal temples, ma'am, that you're mentioning, those would be typically in the southern region of the southern part of the country?
They have survived in the southern part of the country, but they existed everywhere. So we have evidences of or some ruins of such temples even in Kashmir. You have such temples in Uttarakhand. You have glimpses. I mean, very close to Chandigarh, there is a Bhima Kali temple, which was a royal temple. Very little of it has survived. So they were there everywhere, but very few of them have survived in the northern
Ma'am,
part of the country.
one point that you touched upon, that you mentioned that if someone has read Ramayana or Mahabharata, probably if not, they can probably connect to those stories or those legends through the temples that we have in India. So one question that I have with you: so how do we connect those stories? I mean, suppose I am not someone who has read Ramayana or Mahabharata, right? Now, if I am visiting the temple, so how can we connect these stories together to put it across in a table that okay, these temples, I mean, depict how Ramayana would have happened, maybe through the architecture.
Okay, so see, Ramayana and Mahabharata are two stories which you would have heard in some form and shape. You might have seen it as a TV serial, you might have seen it as a film, you might have heard it from your grandparents, or you might have read it. In fact, most people have not read it. Most people have heard the story in some form or shape. Unfortunately, they are not a part of our school curriculum, which it should be, in my opinion. But we would have heard it from our grandparents, most probably. So we all know the basic story. Now, these are huge stories, they're long stories. There is nothing as long as Mahabharata, 100,000 shlokas. It's a huge story. So we all know a smaller version of that story. We know the basic storyline of what it is. Now, when you go to the temples, two things happen, and I've written in detail about this in my book, Lotus in the Stone. When you go to, let's say, let's take Ramayana. Now, story of Ramayana travels from Ayodhya to Sri Lanka in the south. Briefly, it goes little northeast to the Mithila area, current day Bihar, Nepal area. Right? This is how the story travels. It's a travelogue in a way. So when you travel even today, when you travel to Mithila, how is Sri Ram treated? They still treat him like the son-in-law, Var, as they say in Indian languages. When you travel to Ayodhya, how is Sri Ram treated there? He's treated there in two ways. One is Ram Lala, the infant, the little boy who was born in Ayodhya, the son of the soil, and as Raja Ram, because he ruled from Ayodhya. Now, when you come to the south, let's say Dandakaranya, or a little more south, where, or Kishkindha, the current day Karnataka, how do we see Sri Ram there? If you visit the temples in the south, you see him as Kodandaram, the one Ram who's holding a bow in his hand. Okay. Because that's how the South Indians saw him. He roaming around in a tapasvi vesh, but holding a bow and arrow. So the story travels. So if you say, why do we see it like this? Because the story happened, the people still remember what happened, and they remember the characters in the same form and shape. So similarly, when you go to Mathura, you see Krishna as Balakrishna because he spent his childhood there. And when you go to Dwaraka, you see him as a family man. He's always there with his extended family, with his 8 wives and his many sons, his parents, his Kuldevi, his Guru. So you see him because that's how he lived there. When you go to Braj area, Mathura area, you see him with Radha. But when you go to Dwaraka, you see him with Rukmini because that's how he lived. So that's how these stories are still living in our midst. One, this. Second, both these stories are travels. They travel, So Sri Ram traveled from Ayodhya to Janakpur and back. He traveled from Ayodhya to Sri Lanka and back. So with them you travel the whole country. Mahabharata has characters from as far as Gandhar in the west and Manipur in the east. But during the one Parv, all the Pandavas travel across the country. They go down till Kanyakumari and come. They go on a Tirth Yatra where they cover each and every Tirtha in the Bharatvarsha. So this is how they connected India. These two stories connect India. Everybody, I have traveled to a lot of places and I haven't yet found a place which doesn't have the footprints of either Sri Ram or Pandavas. Pandava's footprint can be found in every place in this country. Every small little place. Now I used to live in Goa, and Goa has a cave, an ancient cave, which they call Pandava's cave. Right. And they say that Pandavas came here and lived. And for a long time, I did not believe it because in my head, the story of Mahabharata doesn't go there. But now when I'm reading Mahabharata in original, I do see that they did travel through that. And they must have stopped by. They might have stopped there for a day or two, but they did stop by there. It was called Aparanta Desha, and that's where they stopped. So these two stories are integral to India because their footprints can be seen everywhere, and their essence is still living in the same form and shape, in and around us.
That is really fascinating, actually. So, because of these people, these characters, the Pandavas, Sri Ram during the Ramayana, so they covered all these parts. So, they have left traces or the temples depict that they have been here, right?
Yes.
So, that is really fascinating. I mean, for someone probably who wants to again revisit the history, the mythological history, probably they should visit these temples to understand how all these stories unfold. That is one great thing, ma'am. About these temples, I understand there is various architecture of various different types of temples have different architectures. So how are they differentiated, and is there a differentiation because of the period that they were built in, or because of the people that they were built by?
Yes. So let's understand what is architecture. Architecture is primarily style. So it involves a material, which is usually a stone, or let's say the stone temples are the ones which have survived. They were probably wooden temples, or they were probably temples made out of perishable material which haven't survived. So the ones who have survived are the stone temples.
Okay.
Now, one is the availability of stone. So temples were made using the stone that was available. We do have examples of temples that were built from stone that was brought from a long distance. For example, Konark Temple in Odisha. It's right on the banks of a sea, and there is no source of stone close by, but it is made out of stone. So they did have the technology to port stone, huge quantities of stone. Now the second is architecture is a function of two things. It's a function of when it was made and who made it. So it carries a timestamp of the time it was created and the dynasty that it created. So for example, when you see Hoysala temples, they have a typical lattice window. There are windows with holes in them with beautiful designs in them, and they are known for their fine work. So when you go to other temple styles, so the basic grammar of a temple remains the same. So the temple has garbhagriha, mandapa, different mandapas, smaller temples, parivar devata temples. So that grammar remains unchanged across the country. But within that, now how the shikhara will be made? Will the mandapa have pillars or not? And what will be carved on those pillars? And then stylistic details. They differ from place to place and time to time. Now, those details can be a separate talk in itself, but what you must understand is that the finer the work, the grander the temple, more prosperous those times and those kings were. So the grandeur of a temple and the fine workmanship are an indicator of very, very prosperous times. Because only a prosperous king could have sponsored that kind of work.
Exactly.
Or nurtured those kind of artisans who had that level of mastery. So when you look at the Kailashnath temple in Ellora, which has been carved out of single rock, top down, marvel at the craftsmanship, but we must also understand it's a great engineering marvel. It's a great architectural marvel. So what I'm trying to say is that while you get a lot of information about different styles, you say Chola temples, Pallava temples, Hoysala temples, Malla temples, Odia temples, Kalinga temples. So you will find a lot of details and or documentation of what makes those styles. But what we need to understand is that these are indicators of our past glory.
Right, absolutely.
But what you should notice when you go, you should notice what is the style of shikhara, what is the style of mandapa, what are the typical sculptures that are carved on the outside. There are torans that are different. There are the platform, Jagati, on which the temple stands. They have different styles. So they are stylistically very, very different. And it's also a function of the stone. So for example, a lot of South temples are in hard stones like granite. They are not easy to carve. While a lot of temples like Khajuraho are made out of sandstone, sandstone is a soft stone that is easy to carve. So a lot of those factors also play in when you look at the architecture overall.
So will it be right to say the kind of architecture that you're talking about, and during those days, right? Today we are talking about such scientific developments. We have all the resources at our disposal. The stones that you mentioned, that the example of Odisha temple, right, wherein it's on the bank of a sea, and there is no way those stones could have been were founded there itself. They must have been brought from somewhere else.
Yes.
So will will it be right to say the architecture at that point of time was much advanced than what we have today?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So my favorite example is, let me give you three examples from three different parts of the country. Look at Brihadeshwara temple in Tanjore, look at Kandariya Mahadev temple in Khajuraho, and look at Kailashanatha temple in Ellora, and look at Konark or Jagannath Puri in Odisha. These have been standing for more than 1,000 years. They've survived the weather conditions. They have survived rain and sun. They've survived invasions. They've survived all kinds of things. And still they put us in awe. They are right there in front. Can you ask today's engineers and architects to recreate them? And I haven't found a yes as of now. Every time somebody says, oh, do you think India was more advanced than now? And I say, can you recreate? And the answer is no, which means that what we think as advancement is not really that advanced as our ancestors were. But what I want, and I don't want to say that we are not advanced. I mean, without getting into the debate of who was more advanced, I would say, can our current architects take inspiration from these and create similar architecture for us rather than creating steel and glass boxes? Because these architectures are more suited for our weather conditions. They are sustainable. They are long lasting. They've been built for generations. So my bigger concern is that we are not taking inspiration from them because we just see them as nice temples. We don't see them as engineering marvels. We don't see them as civil engineering marvels. We don't see them as a great amalgamation of engineering, aesthetics, architecture, culture, art, history, storytelling, spirituality, religion, everything put together. Everything brought together so beautifully that you actually miss seeing the engineering and architecture in your face.
That's a great point. Actually, when we, or anyone for that matter, goes to a temple, it's only because of the religious faith or the pujas that we do, right? When we are visiting a temple, we hardly look at the kind of architecture that temple has, the history behind that, the efforts that have been put to make that temple, which has been standing for the last maybe 7,000 years, 2,000 years at least.
Right.
So that's actually a very different way and very practical way to look at it. Right. Yes, definitely the religious sentiments are there, but when you're going to such a temple, so we should actually appreciate the efforts that have been put in.
Yes. We should notice that everything comes together, but we should not downplay the religion part because that spiritual faith has sustained the temple.
Exactly.
That's the core of, that's the essence.
So, ma'am, I belong, so my native place is Devghar, which is one of the 12 Jyotirlingas known as Baidyanath Dham, right? So, since childhood, we have heard about these pilgrimage sites or the Tirth Yatras as we call it, right?
Right.
So, can we draw a map how the Tirth Yatra in whole of India happens, from where to where, and what are the pilgrimage sites in India? And if we can just throw light on what are the maybe some highlights about these places.
We have a very Western way of looking at India. So when we say, a lot of time in interviews, people say, tell me one best temple, tell me one best destination. What is best for me may not be best for you.
Right, absolutely.
Right. And also the fact that India was full of pilgrimage sites. Only a few of them have survived. Some of them are these 12 Jyotirlingas, 51 Shakti Peeths, although Shakti Peeths are in a state where we can do much more for them.
Right.
Then, there are, depends. So I would say the spiritual map of India depends on your faith. So if you are a Shiva, then these 12 Jyotirlingas, there are 84 Shiva Kshetras, they become important for you. So for example, Pashupatinath in Kathmandu is not really a Jyotirling, but is it any less important than a Jyotirling? Not really. For anybody who believes in Shiva, it's a place to go, right? So if you are a Devi Bhakt, then those 51 Shakti Peeths and your Gram Devi and your Kul Devi become important. If you are a Ganpatya, then places associated with Ganpati or Surya or Vishnu become important. So the spiritual map really depends on you. Then there are these Mokshadaini Saptapuris, So there is one shlok which says Ayodhya, Mathura, Maya, Kashi, Kanchi, Avantika, Puri, Dwaravati, Chaiva, Saptet, Mokshadaini. So these 7 cities, I can repeat it for you. Ayodhya, Maya is Haridwar. Ayodhya, Mathura, Maya. So Ayodhya, Mathura, Maya, which is Haridwar. Kashi, Kanchi, Avantika. Kashi is Varanasi. Kanchi is Kanchipuram in South India, very close to Chennai. Avantika is Ujjain in Madhya Pradesh, Mahakal place, Mahakal Kshetra, and then Dwaraka. in the western coast. So these 7 cities are called Mokshadaini cities, and all these cities are associated with either Shiva or Vishnu or Devi. So Kashi is Kashi Vishwanath, Mahakal is in Ujjain, and Vishnu associated with Krishna avatar. You have Mathura and Dwarka. Kanchipuram is a very Siddha Devi Kshetra. So it depends on how you want to look at it. There are Yuga Tirthas. I have a complete lecture on sacred geography of India. So there are Yuga Kshetra. So they say that in Trita Yuga, there used to be Namisharanya, which is close to Lucknow in UP. In Treta Yuga, it used to be Pushkar, which is in Rajasthan. In Dwapar, it was Kurukshetra. Kurukshetra is in Haryana. And in Kali Yuga, in the current times, it is the Ganga, which is the biggest Tirth. In today's time, Ganga is the most important Tirth for us, Kali Yuga. So it depends which lens you look at. And because Hinduism is not something which says, this one thing is more important. What is important for you depends on who's your Ishta Devata, who's your Kula Devata, who's your Grama Devata. So that becomes more important for you than anything else. So, but mota, if I have to say, then these 3-4 places or these 7 cities have become the most important tirthas, which one can easily. At some point in time, they were not so easy to do, but today most of these tirthas are easy to do.
Okay, thanks a lot, ma'am. I have one more question around our festivals. Right, we have so many festivals across India. It's a huge country, and it's a varied, caste, religion. Then there are sub-castes, and every religion has their own festivals. So now I'm sticking just to the Hindu religion part of it. In Hindu religion also, we have various festivals, Diwali, Holi. So what I would like to know, we celebrate these festivals. I mean, we have the basic idea about the stories behind probably all these festivals. So can you please help us at least, know the science and the mythological story behind at least some of the major festivals that we have in India? Could be Diwali, Holi, Navratris.
Right. So for Navratri, you must read my book on Navratri, which documents the Navratri celebrations in 16 different kshetras of India. So let's understand the festival calendar of it. So if you take 1 year, typically our year starts on Chaitra Pratipada, which is also celebrated as Yugadi or with various names, Chaitra Navaratri when they start. Most of the communities start their new year then, but some communities also have a different date to start their new year. But whichever day you start, so if you look at the annual calendar, the festivals actually follow a cosmic cycle. So there is something called Parv. Now, Parv is a term that we end up using for festivals. It's used as a synonym. But Parv actually means there are 5 Parvs every month. So which are those Parvs? Every Amavasya, every Purnima, every Ashtami, and every Sankranti. So every month you have these 5 things, and these 5 things are the Parvas. And if you see, most of our festivals fall on these parvas. So either you have them on Amavasya or on Purnima. So Diwali comes on Amavasya, Holi comes on Purnima. So they all fall on those parvas. So there is a cosmic calendar, but again, depending on what you follow. So if you are a Vishnu Bhakt, Ekadashi becomes more important. If you are a Shiv Bhakt, the Pradosh, which is the 13th of every fortnight, becomes more important. So it depends on what you follow again. And then let me give you the example of Kumbh Mela. Now, Kumbh Mela happens once in 12 years. Why only 12? Why not 10 years? Why not 5 years? Why not 15 years? Why only 12 years? Right. Because Kumbh Mela is following the path of Guru or Jupiter in the sky. Now, Jupiter goes around the earth, or, with respect to earth, the journey of Jupiter is such that it completes a cycle in 12 years. So when it comes back at the same point, the Kumbh Mela happens. So the actual original Kumbh Mela is the Haridwar Kumbh Mela, because it happens when Guru is in the Kumbh Rashi, is in the sign of Aquarius. Okay. So when Jupiter is in the sign of Aquarius, the Kumbh Mela at Haridwar happens. When it is in the sign of Capricorn, Makar in Indian languages, then the Prayag Kumbh happens. So it's actually not Kumbh Mela in Prayag, it's actually Makarastha Mela in Prayag. So when it is in the Leo sign or Simha Rashi, it happens in Nasik and Ujjain. That's why those Kumbh Melas are called Simhas. So they all happen at a interval of 12 years because the Jupiter comes back to the same Rashi in 12 years. So lot of our festivals are actually following a cosmic cycle, and the stories have come from different Itihas Puranas, and every region again has different stories associated with those festivals. The common story of Holi, Holika Dahan is very popular, of how Hiranyakashipa and Holika story is there. In Diwali, we say that Sri Ram came back home. Sri Ram came back from Sri Lanka to Ayodhya. So Ayodhya celebrated his return. But that's one of the stories. There are other stories. So 15 days after Diwali, we have Kartik Purnima, which is celebrated as Dev Deepavali. And in Skanda Puran, we have Kartik Mas Mahat, where it says that the whole of Kartik Mas, you should actually be lighting lot of diyas, because that's when the sky is at its darkest. So on the night of Diwali, the sky is at the darkest. So that's why we created a festival where a lot of diyas are lit. So there's a lot of light that we, Deep Dan it's called, but there are a lot of lighting up happens during that time. And there are a lot of stories for each festival. For Navratri, we say that the 9 nights of the Devi. So she's celebrated for 9 nights in 9 different swarup. Again, the celebration differs. So in North India, we have something called Kanya Puja, where Kanyas are invited and Kanya Puja is done. If you go to the Bengal side, then, Durga is invited and Durga is created. If you come to the South India, they do a lot of Sumangali Puja. They invite women and they do puja. So the idea is to see divine in what is available around you. You can see them in young girls, you can see them in married women, you can see them in a Mrin Murti or clay Murti. You can also see when you look at Durga Puja, and every community has some form of it, you create Durga, you worship her for 9 days, and then she goes back from where she's come. Now you can think of her coming back from her loka to our loka, or you can think of her as being created out of the clay and then she again becomes the clay. So we get the clay from the river, create her, worship her, and then she again goes back and merges with the same clay. Now what is happening? We are recreating the cosmic cycle of creation, sustenance and dissolution. What in Hindi or Sanskrit we would say Srishti, Sthiti and Samhar. Srishti, creation, Sthiti, sustenance or maintenance, and Samhar means dissolution, which is merging back with where you came from. So if you understand them at a deeper level, all the festivals are recreating a cosmic event, and in a way reminding you that wherever you may be today, you have to go back and merge back into the same thing that you came from.
So isn't that the whole truth of life?
Absolutely. So our festivals are celebration of what is, but a reminder of the larger truth, to not let us forget that larger truth.
That was some heavy stuff, ma'am. It will take some time to absorb everything and to then again,
You want me to talk in a simpler manner?
No, I think that was really, really enlightening, actually. Ma'am, I believe that this is just the first episode that we are doing with you. I believe you have many more episodes inside you, because I know that you are also into Skand Puran, you are into Mahabharata and all. So for today's session, we'll stick to the temples, and I think we have covered a lot of stuff that even me, the listeners, will have to absorb and then maybe process it further. I have not questioned, I just wanted to know about your book, The Lotus in the Stones. If you can please tell us something about the book.
So I have many books. I have 3 books on temples. It's called Devalaya series. So there are 3 books are published, and there will be some more in the series. So the first book is called Unusual Temples of India, where I have spoken about temples which are very different. They are not temples dedicated to Shiva, Vishnu, Devi. Okay. They are temples which, even if they are dedicated to them, there are some very unusual things, just to give you the diversity of our spiritual traditions, So that's my first book in that series, Unusual Temples of India. The second book in that series is Cave Temples. because cave temples are the oldest temples, and caves are also the places where most of our rishi munis had their ashrams. That this is where they meditated, and the initial dwellings also. Even we lived in initially in the caves. Our dwellings were caves, so the temples were caves, and a lot of important temples continue to be in caves. For example, Amarnath Jyotirling, it still continues to be in a cave, and a lot of temples you'll see have been created in the form of caves. So cave temples is one second book in the Devalaya series, and the third in the Devalaya series is Devi temples of it. Again, Devi temples have a lot of diversity. There are Shakti Peeths, there are Siddha Peeths, there are Gram Devis, there are Kul Devis, there are Devis. There are Sati temples where the women who did something very, very miraculous or very, very courageous, they were seen as the Swarup of Shakti, and their temples were there. So these are three, and the fourth one is in the making. Hopefully you'll get it soon. The Lotus in the Stone is my personal journey as a traveler, how I started discovering India, and how I became from a casual traveler to a pilgrim. How I discovered India, how I discovered the cultural nuances of India, how I discovered the invisible threads that connect India. What is it that connects let's say a Tamil speaking person to a Kashmiri speaking person to a Ahmiya speaking person? It is our common faith. The moment you tell them, that this person is like Hanuman, they know what it means. It means that this person is dependable. He'll move mountains if need be. So that common understanding of some of these nuances is what I have captured in Lotus in the Stone. Besides that, I have co-edited a book with Dr. Vivek Debroy. It's called Navratri, When Devi Comes Home, where we have documented 16 different kshetras, including Nepal, how they celebrate Navratri. Again, it brings in unity in diversity. Apparently, everybody celebrates Navratri in a very, very different way. But if you see the underlying process, it remains more or less the same. The essence remains more or less the same. So that is one book. Then I have translated Ayodhya Mahatmya from Skanda Puran, which is about each and every Tirth Kshetra in Ayodhya, and I've recreated the map of Ayodhya based on my own travels in Ayodhya. So that's something I'm really proud of, and I'm really blessed to have done that.
And we think that we can have more of these, on your books and the travel experiences that we have in our further episodes. Thank you, Anuradha ma'am. This was really, something learning from me, for the viewers, and we really hope that you enjoyed the show, because I thoroughly enjoyed it, and we hope to have you soon again on the show.
Sure, look forward to, and wish you all the best for your show.
Thank you, ma'am.
And
Thanks a
may
lot.
you always have the blessings of your Ishta.
Thank you.